"No man can last the night with me," said the giant bride, until the lone rancher did. Witness this unbelievable, true, inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. Even before the sun had vanished behind the horizon, a hush crept over the little settlement of Red Vista. Dust-laden wind whispered across the dry plains, carrying with it rumors of the giant bride's lodge perched high on the bluff overlooking the valley. Folks in town spoke in soft tones, eyes darting toward the dark ridge, where in silhouette the lodge cut a forbidding figure against the sky. Colt Mercer pulled his hat low and guided his horse through the silent main street. The wooden storefronts stood shuttered. A few lanterns glowed through dusty windows. He had heard everything about the curse, about the men who stayed the night and never left in full strength. And yet he felt compelled to know, was it superstition, or was there something darker at play? He dismounted in front of the small saloon and stepped inside. The air was heavy with stale smoke and wood polished by 100 travelers' hands. A few local prospectors turned their heads, their faces pale. Colt strolled to the bar and ordered water. The bartender, an older man with grizzled whiskers, nodded solemnly without asking questions. "You're going up there tonight," the bartender said, voice low, his eyes shifting to the north ridge. Colt nodded. "I intend to stay until dawn." The barkeep's face darkened. "No man has ever done that, Mr. Mercer. You'll meet shadows, whispers, things that have no name. Many have tried. Don't remain unchanged." Colt paid and tipped his hat. He exited into the dusk, heading westward toward the trail that climbed to the bluff. The path was rocky and steep, bathed in the pale glow of twilight. Occasional tufts of wild sage sighed in the wind. The silence felt alive. At the crest, he saw it. The lodge stood formidable, with tall stone walls and narrow windows that glinted faintly in the moon's ascent. Ivy crawled over portions of the masonry as if nature itself tried to reclaim it. A single lantern flickered near the front door. He advanced. The door swung open from within, revealing the giant bride. She was tall, taller than a woman should be, her figure slender but powerful, draped in a gown of pale silk that seemed almost to glow. Her eyes held a blend of pride and sorrow. She welcomed him with a nod. "Good evening, Mr. Mercer," she said. Her voice had weight. "So few have courage enough to come. Please enter." He stepped in. The foyer was vast, walls carved in obsidian stone, floors of dark marble, faint torchlight flickering in sconces. Though the building was grand, it bore an ancient aura, as if its stones had witnessed centuries. She guided him to a sitting chamber. A fire glowed in a great hearth. The furnishings were elegant yet austere. Carved chairs, a high-backed divan, heavy curtains drawn closed. A table bore a silver tea set she poured. The steam drifted upward, carrying a floral scent with something elusive and mingled, something unsettled. "Drink," she said softly, extending a cup. "It will calm the journey ahead." Colt accepted, swirling the liquid in the cup. It was warm, mildly sweet. He drank. He kept his senses alert. He asked quietly, "You say no man can last the night with you. Will you tell me why?" She studied him for a long moment. Her eyes, in lamplight, revealed depths of exile and regret. "Because this lodge is bound by a curse," she replied. "Whatever a man fears, whatever guilt he hides, whatever darkness he carries, they all come alive here in the night. The lodge does not allow escape. The walls murmur, dreams bleed into reality, self fades. None endure." Colt swallowed. "Then I will not flee. I will see it through." She nodded. "You may but know this, the night is long. The hour before dawn is cruelest." She led him through corridors, lit by torches. The halls were high and cavernous, portraits hung in shadowed recesses, their subjects unrecognizable. The carpeted steps spiraled upward. The wind gusted outside, rattling windows. In the corners, shadows gathered and dissolved. At last, she showed him to a grand bedroom, with high windows looking out over the valley. The moon cast pale silver across the bed's folds. The chamber felt heavy. She gestured politely. "Here, rest. I will return after midnight. Sleep, and do not fear what comes. If you resist fear, you may survive." Colt nodded. He disrobed, placed his boots neatly by the side, and lay on the bed. The covers were cool. The room felt too quiet. He stared at the ceiling, listening to distant wind. At night's first hour, nothing seemed amiss beyond the wind's low moan. But gradually, subtle shifts began. The floorboards whispered beneath his feet. Shadows stretched in unnatural ways. The curtains fluttered, though no breeze came. A faint voice echoed, so soft he almost convinced himself it was memory. He focused on his breath, on the solidity of the bed, on the fire's distant glow in the hall. As midnight drew near, the temperature dropped. His breath came in small clouds. From a corner of the room, a silhouette formed, a tall shape with shifting edges. It moved, paused, then glided. From the darkness came a voice, an anxious plea, a demand, a scornful laugh. Colt felt his heart pound. He sat upright, fighting impulse to flee. He tapped deep into his resolve, reminding himself who he was. A rancher used to dry storms, to hardships, to waking before dawn to face long days in heat and dust. He whispered to himself, "Do not break, do not tremble. You will see the light again." The figure advanced, its form contorted, sometimes tall and gaunt, sometimes sprawling like mist. It whispered his name. It dredged up regrets, old failures, losses, the wife he couldn't save, the debts he couldn't repay, the eyes of children he let down. It spoke in voices he recognized and ones he could not place. He clenched his fists, rooted his mind to the moment. He spoke aloud, "You have no power over me. I will endure." The figure flickered. The walls moaned. The torchlight wavered. The room seemed to ripple. Then other forms joined, beasts, faces, dark arms reaching from corners. The floor seemed to slant. The ceiling bent. The fire's glow dimmed. He felt cold hands brush his ankles. He saw movement at the edges of vision, figures behind curtains, behind doors, staring. He shut his eyes tightly and breathed. He pictured morning light, the gentle stirrings of dawn, the promise of survival. He pictured his home, the open plains. He held to that vision. At some point the onslaught ceased. The walls stilled. The air warmed. The form in the corner retreated. Silence settled, heavy, unnatural. He opened his eyes. He was still in bed. The night had passed somewhere in the blur. He glanced at the clock on a nearby table, minutes before dawn. He exhaled slowly. When she returned, just before sunrise, she found him standing by the window, gazing east. She looked at him, surprise and something softer in her eyes. "You lived," she said. He turned, voice steady. "I lasted the night." She closed her eyes as though feeling a release. The curse's hold in that chamber dimmed, for now, and in that vulnerable moment, her stern mask cracked. They had done something almost no one had ever done, faced the dark, and survived it. And so, though dawn had not yet broken in full, a new chapter stood ready to begin. The wind over Red Vista carried a restless hush as evening slipped into dusk. In that remote little settlement, people closed shuttered windows early. The faintest rustle, the softest footfall, sparked uneasy glances. At the far edge of town, Colt Mercer sat in the dim light of the saloon, listening to whispers. Men who had gone up to the bluff, to the lodge of the giant bride, had never truly come back the same, or at all. But tonight Colt was resolved. He would stay until dawn and see what haunted that place. He left the saloon just as the last pink light vanished from the sky. His horse's hooves crunched on gravel as he rode toward the ridge. The path was uneven. Sagebrush and scrub clung to the slopes. The lodge, perched like a sentinel at the top, looked ancient and unwelcoming. Lamps glowed softly from windows high above. Vines crept along stone walls. And in the last pale light, the building's silhouette resembled a fortress built to keep something in or out. Colt dismounted and tied his horse at a gnarled, wind-blasted post. He brushed dust from his boots and adjusted his jacket before stepping up to the doorway. The door swung open on silent hinges. He entered a vast foyer. The air was cool and still. His boots echoed on marble. He sensed at once that this was no ordinary house. The architecture felt older than civilization here, a place forged by dread and secrets. She appeared then, the giant bride, tall, commanding, draped in pale silk that caught what light remained. She stood in the shadow near the staircase. Her face was elegant, but her eyes bore a tragic wear. There was beauty and also burden. She inclined her head. "Welcome, Mr. Mercer," she said softly. The tone was neither warm nor cold, but firm, like someone who has long waited for a challenge. She led him deeper, corridors branching like the tendrils of memory. Torchlight flickered in wall sconces. The smell of old stone and faint incense hung in the air. Paintings and tapestries lined hallways. Though their subjects were obscure, their faces blurred by time. Shadows pooled at corners, as if reluctant to yield to light. At last she ushered him into a parlor. A fire crackled in a broad hearth. Heavy rugs and carved chairs created a formal space. On a table lay silver tea implements, a decanter, and 2 cups. She poured and offered the cup to Colt. He accepted it, murmuring thanks. The tea was fragrant and calming. She sat across from him, face poised. He cleared his throat. "Why do you say no man can last the night with you?" Her lips pressed in a slender line. She regarded the fire. "Because this house is alive. It awakens what lives in a man's deepest shadows. Guilt, fear, regret, they are not hidden here. They walk, breathe, demand reckoning. No man has ever endured them all." Colt paused, absorbing her words. The firelight flickered across her countenance. He nodded slowly. "Then I mean to endure." She studied him, then stood. "Follow me." She led him upstairs, past landings that looked down into the valley, past windows that gazed into darkness. The lodge's upper levels felt narrower, suffocating, yet rugs muffled sound. The walls seemed to lean inward. At last she brought him to a chamber with tall windows facing east. The moon's light washed the room pale. "Sleep," she said. "Do not fear what comes. At midnight the house will turn. The hour before dawn is worst. If you survive until then, you may find your way through." She stepped to the door, then paused. "I will return." She closed the door gently. Colt sat on the bed, the sheets cool beneath him. He inhaled, surveying the room. Everything was immaculate. The corners looked darker than was natural. The silence was oppressive. He lay back, eyes open. The night stretched. At first nothing happened. Only the soft moan of wind through hidden cracks, distant echoes of something shifting. Then the boundaries began to blur. The floor whispered beneath him. Curtains fluttered, though no breeze moved. Somewhere in the dark came a sigh, a voice so faint he thought it his imagination. He drew breath and willed his mind steady. As midnight approached, shadows elongated. One figure emerged in a corner, tall, twisted, indistinct. It moved with hesitation, as though testing boundaries. It whispered his name. In the shifting gloom, he saw faces he had known and lost overlaying that form. A wife, a child, a friend. The voice spoke of failures, betrayals, guilt he thought buried. The figure advanced. The walls groaned. Light flickered. Fear surged. Yet Colt forced himself upright. He drew a line in his mind. "You do not control me." He spoke aloud, voice firm. "You are nothing but my past. You have no hold here." The apparition recoiled, pulling in its shape, its whisper weakening. Then new horrors joined, other silhouettes, masks, shifting bodies at the edge of vision. They reached, they moved. The ceiling seemed to bend. The floor underfoot felt like waves. The heat dropped. Cold fingers brushed his skin. He closed his eyes, clenched his fists. He anchored himself to his purpose, morning, light, survival. He remembered wide ranch fields at dawn, the cry of coyotes in the distance, the dry scent of grass after rain, the feel of earth beneath boots. He clung to that. He repeated in his mind, "I endure." Time became a blur. The nightmares battered him, but he did not fall. He refused to flee, refused to surrender. He held on. Then, just before dawn, the presence retreated. The walls stilled, shadows recoiled. Warmth crept back into the air. The firelight reignited, steady and sure. Breath returned. He opened his eyes. He lay alone in the quiet room. The clock on the table showed minutes before dawn. He sat up, his bones ached, his heart pounded. But he was still whole. The darkness had failed to break him. He rose and moved to the window. The first faint tinge of light brushed the horizon. The mountains in the distance glowed dimly. He turned, the door creaked, and she entered. The giant bride paused at the threshold and looked at him, pale dawn behind her. She said nothing for a long moment. Her eyes glistened. "You have done what none before you could." Her voice trembled. Behind her strength, he saw a sorrow that had lasted centuries. He met her gaze. "I lasted the night." She closed her eyes. The weight in the room lifted. The curse's grip for a moment loosened. She stepped forward and placed a delicate hand on his arm. "You are different," she said quietly. "Perhaps you understand." Outside, light spilled across the valley. The lodge, once so menacing, softened in the pale glow. The giant walls, the heavy shadows, the oppressive silence, all seemed to shift. For Colt, the darkness he had confronted was not vanquished, but he had faced it and prevailed. For the giant bride, the presence of someone who could endure the night meant a chance for hope. As dawn broke fully, they stood side by side at the window. The world beyond awaited, the open plains, the still wild land, a future uncertain but no longer hopeless. And so, the night ended. The lone rancher had changed the story. The curse had been challenged. The giant bride, once isolated in her fortress of dread, now looked beyond, toward the possibility that someone might break the ancient bonds. That night would be remembered. And in the hush that followed dawn, both Colt Mercer and the giant bride understood that darkness is not always undefeatable, if one has the courage to stay until the first light.